We all know that feeling, right? Sun comes out, you squint, maybe grab your sunglasses. Standard stuff.
Hmm.
But imagine if that feeling wasn't just mild discomfort, but actual intense fear,
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah.
That's what we're digging into today. Heliophobia, the fear of the sun, or, well, any bright light, really.
Exactly. And it's really important right off the bat to understand this isn't just, preferring a shady spot on a hot day.
Right.
We're looking at sources like specialty psychiatry, the DSM-5. They classify this as a proper phobia, a specific anxiety disorder.
Okay.
So our mission today is really to unpack what that actually means for someone experiencing it.
Okay, so let's get right to it. In, like, psychological terms, what is heliophobia?
Well, fundamentally, it's defined as this persistent, irrational fear specifically aimed at the sun, sunlight, or sometimes any really bright light source.
Irrational being the key word there.
Absolutely. The crucial part is that it's classed as a specific phobia. That means it's an intense, kind of unwarranted fear about a particular thing or situation here, bright light. And it causes real distress, makes people actively avoid it.
So definitely more than just, ugh, it's too bright out today.
Absolutely. Way beyond that.
Hmm.
Many people find intense light unpleasant, sure, or look for shade when it's hot, but heliophobia triggers a genuine, significant anxiety response, like a proper physiological and psychological reaction.
And what does that anxiety response,
Hmm.
look like? What does it feel like for someone actually living with this?
It can really vary quite a bit,
Yeah.
intensity-wise. Specialty psychiatry lays out a kind of spectrum.
Okay.
On one end, you might have milder stuff, feeling uneasy, maybe a bit shaky, nauseous, even numb when you're out in bright light.
Just uncomfortable.
Right. But then it can ramp up to much, much stronger reactions. We're talking full-blown anxiety attacks, even panic episodes.
Wow, panic attacks just from sunlight. That sounds incredibly, well, overwhelming.
It really can be debilitating, yeah. And beyond just that core anxiety, it can show up in other ways too, physically and mentally.
Hello.
Well, the sources mention things like heightened senses, finding it hard to focus, maybe feeling trapped or like you can't escape the light.
Okay.
And then physically, you might get an irregular heartbeat or that awful feeling of not getting enough air. They call it air hunger sometimes.
Yeah.
Rapid breathing, really dry mouth, sweating a lot, even muscle cramps, or just general physical discomfort.
That's quite a list. And I remember reading about this thing called phantom pain. What's that about?
Yes, that's a really fascinating and obviously distressing symptom. Some people might feel this phantom sensation, like their skin is literally burning intensely in direct sunlight.
Even if it's not.
Exactly, even if there's no visible burn, no redness, nothing. And maybe the sun exposure isn't even that strong, not something that would typically cause a burn in someone else. But for them, the feeling of pain is very real.
Wow, that really underlines the mind-body connection in anxiety, doesn't it?
It really does. But, and this is important, the sources are clear. You have to distinguish this from actual physical conditions.
Right. Rule things out.
Absolutely crucial. You need to make sure there isn't an underlying medical reason for light sensitivity or burning sensations. The source specifically mentioned erythropoietic protoporphyria.
Into a mouthful.
It is. Basically, it's a rare genetic thing. You get a buildup of these light-sensitive chemicals, and sun exposure causes severe actual burning pain. Very different mechanism.
Okay.
So yeah, getting a proper diagnosis is key to know what you're actually dealing with.
Makes total sense. Okay, so we have a better idea of what heliophobia is, what it can feel like. Let's shift gears a bit. How does something like this even start? What are the potential causes or triggers?
Yeah, that's often the tricky part with any phobia, isn't it? Pinpointing one single cause is, well, difficult.
I guess so.
But the sources give us some good frameworks. Specialty psychiatry brings up Rachman's classic 3 pathways for how phobias in general might develop.
Okay, what are those?
So first is classical conditioning. Basically, you have a scary event and something neutral that was present, like bright light, gets linked to the fear.
Like getting a really bad sunburn as a kid, maybe?
Exactly like that. The sun itself wasn't inherently scary, but the pain gets associated with it. Then there's vicarious acquisition, learning the fear by watching someone else have a really bad reaction.
Seeing someone panic in the sun.
Precisely. And the third is informational or instructional acquisition. Essentially, developing the fear because of things you've been told or read about the dangers.
Okay, so learning it intellectually almost.
Kind of, yeah. And beyond those general pathways, the sources point to more specific triggers relevant to heliophobia
I
itself.
mean, the bad sunburn example.
Right, or maybe chronic migraines that always get triggered by bright light, that consistent negative association, or even experiencing some kind of trauma that just happened to occur when it was sunny.
That makes sense? Linking the environment to the trauma.
It does. And Pacific Health Center adds another interesting angle, which feels quite relevant today. They talk about the fear of skin cancer or maybe blindness from too much sun.
Which is a rational concern. Wow.
It starts out rational, absolutely, but they point out that this intense focus on avoiding the sun because of potential harm can actually, over time, morph into a genuine phobia of the sunlight itself.
Ah, so the fear of the consequence becomes a fear of the trigger.
Exactly. The anxiety about the potential negative outcome gets transferred onto the sun itself, becoming an irrational phobic response. It's a subtle shift, but important for understanding how these things develop.
That is subtle. Okay, so understanding the potential causes.
Hmm.
Now, what about the day-to-day reality? What are the actual effects of living with heliophobia?
Well, they can be pretty significant, really touching almost every part of someone's life. As the sources highlight, people often develop major avoidance behaviors.
Makes sense. Avoid the thing you fear.
Right, so this could mean always wearing long sleeves, hats, maybe using sun umbrellas even when it's not that bright. But in more severe cases,
Yeah.
it could mean completely avoiding going outside during daylight hours at
Well,
all.
There. It sounds incredibly isolating and
Yeah.
just limiting.
It absolutely is. And that constant avoidance, unfortunately, can bring its own set of problems, health consequences.
Like what?
Well, the most obvious one is vitamin D deficiency. Sunlight's our main natural source, right?
True.
And the sources also link this potential deficiency, plus the social isolation from missing out on daytime activities and maybe living in a constantly dim or dark home environment,
Mhm.
to an increased risk of depression. There's also just that feeling of alienation, seeing everyone else enjoying the sun while you're stuck inside. Can really take a toll.
It sounds like a real downward spiral. Fear leads to avoidance. Avoidance leads to physical issues and mental health challenges.
Precisely. It's like a cascade effect.
Mm.
And while, yes, the sources mention you can manage vitamin D with supplements or fortified foods,
Right, that's fixable.
that doesn't really touch the big psychological and social impact of the phobia itself. Plus, remember what Pacific Health Center said. This fear of bright light can sometimes broaden out.
How's-
It can sometimes lead to a fear of public places or even just being around people generally, simply because managing the phobia in those situations feels impossible. Your world just shrinks.
Yeah, it really paints a picture of a very constricted life that's quite sobering.
Yeah.
But it sounds like there's help available. What are the treatments?
Yes, absolutely. Fortunately, there are several good evidence-based treatments. The sources list quite a range.
Right.
Things like talk therapy, different kinds, really, aimed at understanding the fear. Then there's exposure therapy.
That sounds like facing the fear.
It is, but in a very gradual, controlled, and safe way. The idea is to slowly desensitize the person to the bright light. There are also self-help techniques people can learn.
Mm-hmm.
Support groups can be really helpful too, connecting with others who get it. And a big one is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's very effective for anxiety. It focuses on spotting and changing those negative thought patterns and behaviors that fuel the phobia. Plus, relaxation techniques are often taught alongside these.
And what if it's, really severe, like those panic attacks you mentioned?
Right. For severe cases where the anxiety and panic are just overwhelming and really disrupting life, the sources say anti-anxiety medication might be recommended as part of the overall plan, just to help manage those really acute symptoms.
Okay. So, wrapping this up then, our deep dive into heliophobia. It's shown us it's way more than just not liking bright days.
Definitely.
It's a genuine specific phobia, a fear of the sun or bright light that causes real distress.
Mm-hmm. And the symptoms can vary so much, from just feeling off to severe panic, even that strange phantom burning sensation.
Yeah. And the causes are complex. Maybe bad experiences, maybe learned fear, maybe even that worry about skin damage morphing into something bigger.
Exactly. And the effects, as we saw, go way beyond just needing sunglasses, vitamin D issues, potential depression, isolation. It really impacts daily life.
Hugely.
But, and this is the crucial takeaway, I think, there are effective treatments. People don't just have to live with this. There's hope. There are ways to manage it.
It's so true. It's easy to just take sunlight for granted, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just there.
Absolutely.
But for someone with heliophobia, it's this massive source of anxiety that can literally shape their entire existence.
It really underscores how something so fundamental to our environment can be experienced in such profoundly different and difficult ways by some
Yeah,
people.
definitely. So maybe a final thought to leave you, the listener, with. Think about how central sunlight is, not just practically for seeing and warmth, but culturally too. Metaphors of light and dark, mood, energy.
Hmm.
Considering all that, what might be some of the less obvious, maybe deeper ways that a fear of sunlight could shape how a person experiences and understands the world?
Mm.
Beyond just, staying indoors, how might it ripple outwards in ways we don't immediately think of? Something to mull over.